in the top 10 list almost anybody has ever come up with for the most popular verses in the Bible. It is one of the most popular biblical tattoos that people get. It adorns kitchens and decorates walls in houses. It's on jewelry, it's on t-shirts, it's on keychains, it's on flashlights, it's on all kinds of things that you can buy. It has been the theme verse for conferences and retreats and camps. Many of you have used this verse in trying to encourage other people. I guarantee many of us have gotten a greeting card with this verse printed on it. It is one of the most popular verses to sign in somebody's yearbook. It is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. We love that verse. So many people love that verse. And what's not to love? I mean, straight paths. Who wants a straight path? I want a straight path. I want something that's smooth and in the right direction. I want a straight path for life. In the days of the Proverbs, when they were written, roads were not typically straight, nor were they smooth. Their roads, of course, were built of dirt. They were rutted because of drainage from the winter rains, and then horses, other animals, carts going over them, rutting the roads. They were a mess. But when somebody important would come to town, that's when the road work started. Because they had to smooth out the road, they had to fill in the ruts, they had to make it comfortable to travel on, and they would even smooth out some of the sharp curves and turns. They would level the roads so that it was more comfortable for that famous or wealthy or well-known person to come to town. They have a more comfortable ride coming to town. It's kind of like the words in Isaiah, or the words that were spoken about John the Baptist, that make straight the path through the wilderness, level the valleys, or level the mountains, and even fill in the valleys so that this person can come. This is what they did because that was the state of their roads. It wasn't until way later, of course, that the famous Romans came and did their amazing road building techniques where instead of dirt, they made them out of stone, and they would straighten the roads so they were efficient to travel on, and they made the roads so much better. And after people saw the Roman roads, they realized, well, all roads lead to Rome. That's what everybody says. And it was true, because they made roads to be good roads to travel on. And oh, how good it is to have a straight road. I know many of you have driven that stretch to the coast between I-5 and 101, highways 41 and 46. Carl and Lori drive that like weekly, practically, or they do. I mean, that stretch of road has seen a lot of changes in the last 10 or 15 years. Sorry, what was that?
Kellogg has in Wichita.
Oh, yes, and in Wichita, Kellogg Road has done the same thing. I mean, that stretch of road on Highway 41 and 46, we've watched that on the occasions when we've driven that way and seen those changes. You know, it used to be 2 lanes the whole way, and it was kind of curvy, and in a couple places it was slow, and it was steep. And now, it's 4 lanes in some places, it's really smooth, they've taken out these big dips in the road, and they've even leveled out some of these steep inclines. Oh, how good it is to drive on a straight road. But straight roads take a lot of work. When a road is curvy or bumpy or crooked or uneven, it takes a lot of work. That stretch of road, 41 and 46, I have never seen before entire hillsides being taken out so that they can move the dirt to straighten and flatten the road. I mean, sometimes you come around some of those curves and the entire hillside has been graded down. I had no idea that much dirt could be moved from one place to another to make the road good and straight. Straight roads take a lot of work. Dozens of times in the Bible, it talks about straight roads. John the Baptist talked about preparing a straight road for the coming of God's Messiah. Jeremiah talks about rescuing God's people on a straight road from captivity. Isaiah's words that John the Baptist quotes are all about God rescuing his people on a straight and smooth road. The Psalms pray for people to have straight roads in their lives. And other places in the Proverbs even talk about how good it is to have straight paths in our lives. Of course, it's not just talking about a road that we drive on or a road that we walk on. It's talking about, this road, the road here that is so crooked so often. And it needs to be straight because God wants your paths and my paths to be straight. He wants our decisions to be wise. He wants our treatment of others to be pure. He wants our obedience to Him to be faithful. I mean, that's the straight path. It's living the way God wants us to live, living on that straight path, so that we can receive the life and the blessings that God created us for. Straight paths. But see, this is what's crazy about these Proverbs verses that are super famous and we all know them. How they became so famous is a bit of a mystery to me. Because 25% of the verse is what we really like. 75% is the hard work to get there. And that's backwards to how I think. Because we like the ending, we like the straight paths, we want to be on the straight paths, that's the good part. But it takes a lot in order to get there. But God wants straight paths for you and me. And the world needs to see straight paths from you and me. The more the world can see straight paths, the more our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, our relatives, other people can see straight paths in our lives, they can see that God's at work, that it's good work, and that life can be an incredible gift when we live on straight paths that God lays out for us to live. So, let's dig in and look at straight paths. First, let's start with the obvious. Proverbs. We need to know a few things about Proverbs because we don't read Proverbs every day. So Proverbs, 3 things we need to know about Proverbs. 1, we need to know what Proverbs are. Proverbs are tendencies about how life usually goes. We often say, you sow what you reap. That is a tendency, because there are times when we sow something and we reap that thing, and it works really well. And there are other times when we look at somebody and we're like, that's not fair. They didn't sow that, but they reaped it. And we get all mad because they didn't sow what they reaped. Proverbs are tendencies. It usually goes that way. That's how it normally will go. That's what Proverbs are. Proverbs are not promises, and they are not guarantees. They are not formulas. So we can't get mad at God if it doesn't always work out the way the proverb says. We often say, well, if I do A, I'm going to get B. But sometimes we do A and we get Z, and it just doesn't work out. So on the times when it doesn't work out, we're like, it's a proverb, it's not a promise, it's not a guarantee, it's a tendency. It's how life usually goes. The third thing about Proverbs is that Proverbs are not quick fixes. They are not quick solutions to our problems. Usually we can't just find a proverb that fits, apply it right away, and then we get it done and we can move on and forget about the proverb. Most of the time, Proverbs are like roadwork. They take a long time to develop. So Proverbs are not quick fixes. So if we take those things from Proverbs, what they are, what they aren't, and that they take a long time, and we apply that to these verses, let's look at the verses again. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. So what 3 things are required for straight paths, according to this verse? And this is not a trick question, this is straightforward. Number 1 is trust. Number 2 is lean not. Number 3 is we got it. Okay, so trust has to do with surrendering our lives. Saying, God, I believe that you have the best in mind for me. And so I'm going to trust that that's the case. Lean not is don't do it, because it's not the best pathway for our lives. Lean not on our own understanding. And acknowledge God. Give God credit. Submit to God. Let God know that God's important. And heed God. Trust. Lean not. And acknowledge God. And those three things lead to straight paths. Most of the time. Because remember, this is a proverb. There's a couple other things. Notice the contrast between trust in the Lord, lean not on our own understanding. This raises a question a lot of times. Does this mean that if I'm trusting in the Lord, I should forget all of my own understanding? If I am completely submitted and surrendered to God, should I completely disregard my own brain and intelligence and understanding? Survey says, no, that's right. Because God created us with the capacities to think and to reason and understand and believe. The Proverbs talk about all the time that we acquire wisdom, that we seek understanding, we long after it. Through the rest of the Bible, it talks about us renewing our minds. God wants us to use our minds somehow in tandem with surrendering and trusting to God. The two work hand in hand. And that's what we have to somehow call the Proverbs balance. And that's the balance between trusting in God and leaning not completely on our own understanding to the point where we're out of balance. There's a balance there of being able to do both and rely on both gifts that God gives us. The other thing that I think is really fascinating in this verse is there's a word that's repeated, and it's the word all. See, if we swapped out the word some or part, it'd be a little different. Trust in the Lord with some of your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In a couple of your ways, acknowledge God. And that's not what this says. I mean, this is all or nothing. All our heart. All our understanding. God wants it all. God wants us to trust completely, lean not, and acknowledge completely on Him. Because, as the Psalms say, God's ways are the best pathways for our lives. At this time of year, I especially prize shade. I love shade. Because you go from the sun to the shade, and you're like, oh, wow, that shade feels good. When we bought our house, there was nothing in the backyard. And when we walked around the west side of our house in the afternoon or evening on some of those super hot days, we felt the heat, radiating off the wall of the house. And I remember thinking, I don't want that anymore. We need a wall of shade. So we planted trees. And part of our wall of shade was actually already there. It was a street tree that had been built by the developer, and it was an oak tree, and it was decently tall at the time, maybe 5 years old, probably 4 years old. The problem was, it was crooked. The bottom part was straight, but then it took this wonky curve, and it wasn't straight anymore. And we thought, well, let's watch it and see if it rights itself. Of course, it didn't right itself, and after a couple of years, we realized we need to do something about this, or this isn't going to be really part of our shade plan. So we had to figure out how to straighten up a fairly established tree. Well, for challenge number one, of course, is what do you tie it to that's strong enough to cinch it back up? And number two is, it's so well established that it doesn't want to bend. It's resisting all that bending. So the only thing we could do is bend it a little bit, and then a little more, and then a little more. And after about 2 years, that tree was finally straight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, leaning not on our own understanding, in all our ways acknowledging God. That takes time. It doesn't just happen immediately. We can't snap our fingers and trust in God. We can't wake up one morning and we're just leaning not on our own understanding anymore. And we can't flip a switch and say, I'm acknowledging you, God, in everything, and it's all perfect. I mean, it takes time. But the ending is so good because it's straight paths. And it's the best pathways for our lives. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. and He will make your paths straight. Let's pray.